If you're watching this video, it's likely because you've decided to take the entrance exam to become a student at the School of Translation. You're also likely looking for a little bit more information. You have some questions on your mind, perhaps. So this video will help you explore those. First and foremost, by trying to answer, what is it that you need to know in order to write the test? The most general way of answering that question might be to say that a translator is a communication professional. In other words, on the test, we're looking for you to demonstrate that you're ready to become a professional, that you're ready to produce a written product that is of a quality that people would like to purchase. More specifically, you might be having a couple of ideas or questions cross your mind. You may be asking yourself, what will I be asked to do on the test? What is it that you, the School of Translation, are looking for? How can I prepare to take the exam? And what are some myths or misunderstandings about the test that I would do well to avoid? Let's look at each one of these questions one by one. What will I be asked to do? Your first task will be to read a short article in your non-dominant language. If you're an Anglophone, that is to say, if English is your strongest language, the one you feel most comfortable in, then the article will be in French. If you're a Francophone, the article will be in English. The texts that we use come from newspapers or for magazines that are intended for a general audience. The texts are not specialized or technical. After you read the text, you'll be asked to write short answers to 3 questions in your non-dominant language. Again, if your text is in French, then you'll be answering the initial questions in French as well. We're looking for you to write a paragraph or 2 or 3 for each question so that we have enough of your writing to gauge how well you write in your other working language. Next, you'll be asked to write a 200-word summary of the article, this time in your dominant language. In other words, if your article is in French, then you'll be writing your summary in English. The final component of the exam is a 500-word essay written in your dominant language on a topic related to the theme of the article. We'll be asking you an essay question that we'll want you to explore in 500 words in the language that you feel most comfortable with. What are you, that is to say, the School of Translation, looking for? We're looking for different kinds of abilities. One of these is the ability to write accurately and correctly at the sentence level. In other words, we want to make sure that you are able to write grammatically without spelling mistakes, that you can use punctuation appropriately, and other features that are just generally part of good writing. We're looking for evidence that you know a little bit about the world around you, that you understand, for example, what the text, the newspaper or magazine text that you've read, what it's talking about, and maybe that you can even use some of your own knowledge, things that weren't mentioned explicitly in the text, to explore ideas a little bit more in your writing. We're also looking to see that you have knowledge of written conventions that are used to structure formal texts. So when you're writing an essay, for instance, we want to make sure that you understand how essays are written. So your text should have a beginning, a middle, and an ending, and that middle might be composed of several persuasive arguments. Finally, we want to know that you're able to make sense by writing relevant responses to the questions that you're asked, by integrating your world knowledge, by using tone appropriately, etc. Sometimes students draft answers to questions that we ask that don't match, or they produce writing that maybe isn't appropriate for a formal setting. We want to make sure that you're not bothered by those sorts of problems. How can I prepare? There is no body of knowledge that you can study per se, but it would be a good idea to be reading regularly and actively in both your working languages. So you should be picking up a newspaper or magazine or some other source of information on a regular basis in both English and French. You should be reading it actively. In other words, maybe with a pencil in hand, jotting down notes to yourself in a notebook based on words or terms or turns of phrase that you're not familiar with or that aren't part of your active vocabulary, either in English or in French. You should also think about the tools that you'll need to have ready before you start. For example, since you have to be writing in both languages, you'll need to know how to switch your keyboard between English and French so that you can have accents when appropriate. You'll also want to have at your side dictionaries or grammar books or other resources, either on paper or online, so that you can consult them during the test. Now, let's explore some myths that students sometimes have about the test. The first of these is sometimes students will say to themselves, because there's nothing to study, I can just have a go at the test. And we sometimes see students produce what might be called a stream of consciousness writing, like this end result here. In other words, sometimes students write the exam and they don't punctuate what they've written, they don't put capitals, they don't break it into separate sentences, and obviously that's not what we're looking for. To those students, we would say the reality behind the myth is that this is still a test that you have to hand in and that it is for marks. In other words, the quality of your writing is important to us, so you'll need to go over it and make sure that it's well written the same way you would if you were handing in an assignment in any other course. Myth number 2. This is a closed book test. I'm not allowed to consult resources. Sometimes students don't look for outside help by checking dictionaries or other sources of information, and that leads them into trouble. On one instance, and 1 year, one of our exams made reference to the Security Council of the United Nations, and a student who needed to write about it in French didn't know how to say Security Council, and so that student simply made something up. That's not what we're looking for. We want to make sure in reality that you know how to look things up. And in this case, a 5-second Google search would have turned up the UN website and the correct term. In this case, le Conseil de Sécurité de l'ONU. Myth number 3. It's best to use all my time to simply write. When we've seen some students operating under this assumption, we've noticed that the end result is writing with a lot of mistakes that are very obvious that they could have fixed if they had gone back over their work. So the reality behind this myth is that you need to set aside time to review your work. So budget your time. Tell yourself how much of the 4 hours that you're given to write the exam you will use to produce a draft, and how much time you'll use to revise it. You may even want to make sure that you have enough time to print off your writing and read it on paper. This is because most people are better able to revise their own work when they see it on paper than they are when they see it on a computer screen. So, remember that a translator is a communication professional, and that on your test, we'll be looking to see that you've shown that you have the aptitude to create a professional, market-ready communication product. If you have more questions about the exam, you're welcome to write to us at translation@glendon.yorku.ca. To learn more about the Glendon School of Translation, or about translation as a career path, you can also like us on Facebook by searching for the Glendon School of Translation, or follow us on Twitter, we're Glendon Translate. Good luck on the test.